Hello everyone. Today on Geoscientists Voices, we are traveling to one of the most seismically active regions in the world, Greece. My guest today is a central figure in European seismology, Costas Papazachos. He is a professor of geophysics at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, where he has taught for over 25 years. From updating the seismic hazard maps that keeps buildings standing to monitoring the unrest of the Santorini volcano, he is constantly listening to the Earth's pulse. Kostas, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Alexei, for inviting me.
Well, first of all, I want to take you back to before you were a professor. You started in physics, not geology. Was there a specific moment where you knew, I don't want to be a physicist, I want to be a seismologist instead? And if yes, when did it happen?
Yeah, well, for me, it's kind of strange because perhaps you know that I'm a second generation geophysicist, or my father was also a geophysicist. So I was
Yes.
born into geophysics and seismology. On the other hand, I always liked physics in high school, so it seemed natural that I should select physics as a topic in the university. I cannot say there was a very specific moment, but at some point I had to make a decision. I was a student in physics, I was listening to other topics in disciplines of physics, like solid state physics. But I had to make a decision, and you know what happened to kids. They usually either love or hate what their parents are doing. In my case, I happened to fall in love with the topic. So I chose geophysics, which essentially is not far away from physics. It's just an interdisciplinary topic that crosses between geology and physics, combines knowledge from both, so that we can study the Earth using the means and tools that physics provides.
Wow. It's yeah, it's interesting. So basically, you're lucky to also inherited this love and this all this knowledge from your parents. It's really fascinating. Uh, so now you have dedicated decades to understanding seismic hazard. But what was the single biggest hurdle, whether academic, political, or technical, that you personally had to overcome to establish yourself as a leader in Greek seismology?
Well, the problems in this kind of topics are twofold. The first one is perhaps even threefold. The first one is related to the people that listen to your message, and that's usually the biggest problem. So it's kind of unbelievable, but it's surprising that when you realize that people that live in the most seismically active country in Europe, from let's say Malta to northern Norway, and from Urals all the way down to Gibraltar, and we're hosting like 60% the broader area of European seismicity, uh, feel that earthquake hazard is, they feel surprised when they find out about earthquake hazard or when an earthquake happens. So, because earthquakes are very different from all other hazards. First of all, they're not as frequent, not always necessary. For example, we may have heavy rainfall or floods every year, or even fires every year. You may not have a strong earthquake every year. And then the second problem with earthquakes is that the base, your house, which usually protects you from all other geohazards, in the case of earthquakes, is your enemy. This is the house that collapses and kills you. And I found that people have a very hard time to understand this. They have a hard time to accept it. They have a hard time to understand that there are earthquakes which are extreme and can be extremely violent, but they have a low probability, and people have a very hard time to understand low probabilities. That's a general problem in geoscience, not necessarily related to earthquake hazard. So the biggest problem is society. Society is sometimes not ready for your methods. So you tell them that the six magnitude event will have a big aftershock sequence. They feel very uncomfortable. They think that the earthquake will start on Monday, peak on Wednesday, and finish by Friday. That's not the case. And the second problem has to do with that the same kind of resistance is transferred then to the governmental authorities. So usually throughout the world, governments are kind of slow in accepting and designing and proper measures for reality. So usually reality catches up with them, a major earthquake happens, and then they decide to adapt. So the bigger hurdles are not scientific. I mean, we're getting better all the time. There's still a lot of things we don't know, but we're improving our knowledge. And in general, the scientific community has a clear way about how to evolve its scientific discipline, including seismic hazard assessment. The problem is that the people that fund us, who we work for, have a very difficult time to accept that reality can be sometimes not very pleasing. And second, that we need to really work in advance. But that's as you know, a worldwide problem regarding geohazards. If I may add one thing, seismic hazard has a problem on its own, which is that it's really a very multidisciplinary topic. You have to understand everything starting from structure of the earth, seismicity, active folding, wave attenuation, effects of local geology, even effects of buildings, even political issues, because you design things depending on the financial level of your economy. So it's a very complex scientific problem, and you need a broader understanding and knowledge of science before you can tackle it.
Yes, totally agree with that. And as you mentioned, the seismological situation, and including the situation in Greece. So let's dive deeper into this topic. Because we always see photos of the beautiful white houses on the Santorini cliffs in Greece, but you recently published a paper about how the shape of the Santorini cliffs actually amplifies earthquake shaking. Does this mean that the most expensive hotels with the best view are, in fact, the most dangerous seismic spots on Santorini? And how do you explain this risk to the people living there?
Well, okay, I would not say that they are the most dangerous because topographic amplification, which is a well-known feature that topography can aggravate and really um, enhanced seismic motions, is a phenomenon which is widely recognized. In fact, to the level that existing building codes and seismic hazard codes have topographic aggravation factors in the design. So if you live close to a cliff, there are certain factors that you need to apply in the design of the building that take into account an average, of course, topographic aggravation factor. So this is something which is already built into science. It's not something new. In the case of Santorini, however, because the topography due to the caldera is very spectacular, but also very sharp, you get specific focusing phenomena on a certain zone within the caldera, depending on the dominant wavelength of seismic waves. And in fact, this has shown up because when we had the last very damaging earthquake in 1956, the majority of damages was around the caldera. So we have both experimental evidence and also modeling evidence from science that supports that. As you very well point out, it's very difficult to absorb this information and accept it. Because, yes, it's the most impressive part of the island that is most prone to seismic hazard. However, we must remember that there's always a solution to this problem. You just have to simply design your stream infrastructure to be built according to this higher seismic standard level. So it's all a matter of will and decision and political planning to properly design and build houses. So then these houses are completely safe. They may be in a higher hazard zone, but they are built according to standards. We must remember anyway that I think like 80% of our cities are built in areas where earthquakes and volcanoes happen and active tectonics, and there are good reasons for that. These were the most fertile land, nice plains filled with recent sediments because of all the tectonic activity where people could cultivate it or easily build houses. So if you look at mega cities around the world, they are typically in high hazard areas. So Santorini is no exception to that, and I guess the caldera is no exception to that either. It's a typical thing. You just have to explain it to people and properly uh, and take certain proper measures.
Yes, so and talking about the safety from the earthquakes, I know that you are currently involved in the coordination to compile the new seismic hazard zone map of Greece, and this document legally dictates how every building in the country must be constructed to minimize the damage from the earthquakes. So, what is the hardest part about translating the uncertain, chaotic nature into a strict engineering code that keeps people safe?
Well, it's good here that the scientific and engineering community have developed an approach for the last at least 50 years, which is all essentially quite probabilistic. So it's not a problem that we have uncertainty. We just need to propagate this uncertainty into our results. This necessarily means that our results are necessarily more conservative. So, because when we are in doubt and we accept a specific level of losses in any scenario, we have to be more conservative. So there is a mathematical procedure which takes account of this chaotic nature, as you describe it, and it just means we have to build stronger houses, perhaps stronger than they actually need to be, simply because we don't know what to do with this part of knowledge that we still haven't acquired yet. But remember that uncertainty is both what we call aleatory and epistemic. So there's a part of the uncertainty that we'll never be able to understand. This is just chaos, in fact, not even chaos, because chaos still has some order. This is something which, because of the randomness of physical procedures. However, there's a significant part that we do understand, or we will be able to understand with better modeling, and that's what telling our authorities, and especially our Greek community, the people in our country, that with as science progresses and as it evolves, there's a significant part of this uncertainty that is minimized. And as we minimize uncertainty, we can be less conservative and build properly our houses without spending a fortune, just by getting better in science. So it's a good message that Seismic Hazard delivers, that the less uncertain you are, the better science you produce, the more not only efficient but also financially feasible your design will be. And I think that's a very good message.
I totally agree with you. And you talked about science and science applied to engineering and safety. Now let's talk about the education. We currently see a decline in enrollment in geoscientific majors in universities in the United States and around the world. And so, Kostas, if you were facing a room of unsure high school graduates today, would you actually advise them to choose geosciences as their career? And why does the world need them now more than ever?
Alexei, I find it hard to understand why there's this decline. Unfortunately, I guess some of it is also related to the fact that the market for geoscientists is related to disciplines or specific areas which also show a variability. For example, we have there's a decline, for example, in the oil industry and the oil research. But on the other hand, or if you look at all the goals that the United Nations have set up for the next 10 or 20 years, all the goals that governments have set for the next several decades, all these goals are mostly related with geohazard, geoscience, and environment related problems. It is my understanding, and I think the projections are that both the industry as well as the government and consulting will need more and more geoscience in the future. Geoscientists that, if we keep this decline in students going into geoscience department, will simply not have, and this will have very specific consequences. So whether you look at the climate change, which is not something that will disappear tomorrow, whether you accept or not, or if you look at extreme geohazards or problems related to access to basic stuff like water, or to the resources that you need, to geological resources you need to build anything ranging from solar panels to um, wind engines. All of this is related to our environment, which we need to exploit in a sustainable manner. So in that sense, I think that geoscientists will be more and more needed in the decades to come. Of course, in cooperation with engineers, but the engineer will make perhaps the final design. You need somebody that understands how Earth operate, has a model about it, knows how to approach it and knows how you can provide a good solution, which at the same time respects the sustainability of the environment. So um, I find this fascinating. That's what fascinated me in geoscience. And that's what I'm going to I'll tell the students that the big challenges that we're going to face in the next decades will be all related to the planet we're living in. And that's where geoscience will play a fundamental role.
So you've been talking about the possible like future students, but now let's go back in time when you were a student. So now you have been professor for a quarter of century now, and if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your younger self that would benefit you today?
Well, you know, seeing your life a posteriori, it's easy to offer myself a lot of advice. Although I spend a significant amount of time outside my country, I think first of all I would like to have to spend more time. I should have spent more time. I think that being a scientist also means being a citizen of the world. And experiencing the culture and the scientific culture and the way that different people and different groups work, and that's really very valuable. So I would have liked to work for like more extended time periods outside my country. And perhaps the second thing is that because I came back to Greece at some point, and Greece is a smaller country, I had to really work in different disciplines and tackle different topics because we're not such a big community here, and the needs are very specific. And as a result, you get a very good overall understanding of geophysics, but you tend not to focus as much on each individual topic. So I would suggest to students that they should, of course, have a good global understanding of geophysics and geosciences, but they should select one or two topics where they would really strive to excel. And that focus research is what they will be remembered and recognized, together with, of course, integrated work that they will do at a later, more mature stage in their career as scientists.
Uh, Thank you so much. These are great advices. So my next question basically maybe mirrors like the previous question because the previous was about what advice would you give to yourself. Maybe you would add something when I ask the next question. And the next one is, do you have any life hacks for students or early career researchers? Something nobody actually thinks of that would help them survive the pressure of the academia.
Yeah, as you know from your own experience, Alexei, this is a very tough question, and it's tough question because academia and being a scientist really takes a lot of your time, but also a lot of your essence. You get to think about science in your sleep. You get to think about science all the time, and a lot of things evolve around science. Not only that, but the way of thinking in all other matters related to your friends or your family or is very specific. My kids, for example, usually laugh with me and saying that I always said that, I never said, there always had to be a reason. You have to justify everything, your action, your choices. So this is a very tough question. I did a lot of things under a lot of pressure. I think that there is no other way. You have to adopt, if I may say this, I don't know how it will sound, an approach that in science you have to work hard, and as they say in the US, also party hard, which means that you have to find pockets of time where you relax and you really get outside science, outside science, because science can be extremely demanding. You need to devote a lot of time to your research. You need to think about it. The more you think about it, the better ideas you will have. But at the same time, you need to also integrate other aspects of our social life, be interested in more general topics, because you will be faced also with difficult questions. For example, building a hazard code for a country needs to also consider several social and other aspects which are not necessarily part of geoscience, but are affecting how you build a house or how you retrofit a house, or what do you do with houses that are of, let's say, from low income areas, and how do you help these people? You cannot be just a scientist. You need to be a more integrated person. So I would strongly advise the students to find the slots of time where they get away from science and really enjoy music or anything else. Do something, do it at 150%, but do something else.
That Costas, thank you so much for this advice. I'm struggling with this for some time now because I just for me now it seems that I can't live not under the pressure, and if like I try to relax, it's like I'm ready to blow up or something like that. So I really have to find some activities that would let me do that. So
Yeah,
it's
you need to find the activities at the same level that you are doing science. They need to be intense. Scientists are
yeah.
used to living an intense life, and if it's only relaxing, that will not help you for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with you. So the next question is sort of continuation of this a not scientific part of scientist life kind of question. So many students would like to know what the day-to-day reality of a professors look like. So can you describe your typical daily routine? Do you start with coffee and emails, or do you straight dive into the seismic logs?
Yeah, I think coffee and emails are always a must when you start.
Yeah.
I usually wake up around 6:30 to 7 o'clock in the morning, and I go to bed very late. So yes, I do start with uh, checking emails and drinking coffee. But the problem right now with the professor's life is that academia throughout the world has gradually become more demanding from professors. So we are not only now professors that just have to teach, we're not only researchers that have to do research. A significant part of our work now has to do with administration in the very general sense. Like 50 years ago, you just had to teach a course. Now, this course has to follow certain quality assurance guidelines. You just don't deliver a course. You deliver a course that will achieve certain targets, and you have to prove this. You don't need, so you need to write reports. So it's much more formal and complicated. And unfortunately, as many people have find out in academia, all these procedures, which are of course very important and very critical, take a significant amount of your time. So I must say that a professor's life is, as people understand, different from a researcher's life. So when you're a young researcher doing your PhD, somebody else is taking care of all this stuff, and you are mostly focused on doing your research. And that's why some of your both most productive and successful years will be when you are doing your PhD and the following decade. As you get older, the way of that you are working changes. You are more focused on other things. You have students of your own, which is extremely nice because every student is like having an extra hand. So I now have like 10 hands working because I have all the students working with me, and which is a blessing. However, of course, the way that you work when you work with 10 hands is different than when you work with two hands. You have to devote a certain amount of time to each student, and that is more demanding. So, a professor's life is definitely much more complex than when I was doing my PhD. And I best be very honest, I remember this time. I really remember this time. With nostalgia because really it was a very nice period of my life where I was just focused on one thing and didn't have to take care of all the things that we now I have to do as a professor.
Wow, that's really an intense schedule, and I can't even imagine. Like I thought like my schedule is pretty intense, but it's like nothing compared to you and other like senior lecturers, professors. it's crazy, but well,
Alexei, you shouldn't say that. Every generation has its own problems. I mean, you're doing your PhD, you're struggling with data, you have sometimes a lot of problems. Uh, um, as fishermen say in Greece, when they fish ship late at night, the most difficult time is slightly before dawn. That's how PhD are. Before dawn, before you reach your results, is usually the most difficult time of PhD. So at every level of a scientist's career, there are difficult times and difficult tasks. They just change over time. So you broaden your spectrum and your application area as you get older, and at the same time you're also working with other people. So it's just a different thing. Um, I'm pretty sure that when you did your PhD, it was very demanding and very difficult as well. So when you're doing your PhD, so everything is at every phase there are different tasks and challenges.
yeah, you're totally right. So let's talk now about science communication, and let's go back to Greece. In Greece, as far as I know, whenever there is a tremor, the TV channels immediately call seismologists for a prediction. And you were on TV a lot. I watch some of clips with you, but I did not understand Greek. But I saw that you were explaining the seismological situation. So, how do you handle the burden of the public expecting you to predict the unpredictable? And the back-to-back question: do you actually think that we'll be able to predict earthquakes in the foreseeable future with some certainty, at least?
Well, Alexei, I think there's a misconception about earthquake prediction. This may sound funny, but there are certain things that we do predict. There's no science without prediction. So, for example, a seismic hazard code is a way that we predict what will statistically happen over the foreseeable time that the building will operate. And we provide very specific numerical values that can be used by an engineer so that he builds a house in such a way that it will not sustain any damage for the most common earthquake, and it will not collapse and kill its people for the worst case scenario. In fact, we can make this even more strict. So scientists predict, even without understanding. You can go to a doctor and he may predict the evolution of a disease that you have, even though perhaps the science has not really clarified the mechanism. Regarding the media, their concept of prediction is: can you predict if a major earthquake will happen 5 minutes from now after we have this small sequence? You are trying to explain that this is not possible with the current state of knowledge, and maybe, and there are good reasons for that, maybe it will never be possible as you know, because there's a lot of discussion still ongoing in geoscience, how chaotic the earthquake generation procedure is, if small scale changes can really result into a very significant change of what made the earthquake happen. You, as you with the media, it's even worse because you're talking usually to people who are not geoscientists like you or trained in science, so they perhaps were very limited understanding of science, and you are trying to explain scientific issues. However, it's a critical part of our work. Science communication, as you are doing right now, is a very important thing that scientists should not refrain from. They should do their best trying to explain basic issues in the simplest way possible to people through the media and through the journalists, because we need to communicate our knowledge to the people from whom we are working. So I don't mind this burden. I don't mind this pressure. Of course, I'm always careful and how I approach things because people may interpret it in the wrong way, but it's a specific and necessary part of our work because that's the way we communicate with people, exchange knowledge, and transfer what we do know and what the limits of our knowledge to the people so that they are better prepared. In society, there are always people who are willing to listen to reasonable voices. And of course, they're extremists, but at the same time, I think the majority of people are reasonable and can understand. If you speak in a consistent manner and reasonably, eventually they will appreciate what you're saying and really understand how they can use this knowledge to their benefit.
Yeah, it's it's definitely good to have such people who are ready to listen and who would actually use their what you are saying in their lives by saving their lives, lives of their neighbors if they transfer this knowledge. But we again talked about the pressure, and let's go back to how actually relieve this pressure. Scientists are often concentrated on only reading scientific papers, but outside of that, what do you read? What is your favorite book, and not necessarily a professional book or scientific one? Maybe some fiction, and why?
Uh, Well, after reading all of these papers and scientific books and essays and exercise for students, I really don't read that much. I usually read books which are like, for example, novels or um, general books about science again, or based on science. For example, I read a mystery book based on a murder case that revolves around the Laplace theorem, and so it's. I usually
Wow.
pick topics which are related to some which I feel more confident, or even comics that are
Mhm.
based on that. There's a book
Wow.
written by a good Greek mathematician called Logicomics, and it's about the life of Bertrand Russell and his relation with math and philosophy. So usually I tend to read this kind of books. When I was younger, I used to read a lot of conventional novels, but now I'm reading more books that are related to science. Not very nice, of course, but that's what attracts me, and I find the stories very interesting. Also, stories about the history of science, because I'm surprised by that the same phenomena in science have repeated again and again and again. And there's also some wisdom that we can get from reading this kind of stories.
Wow. It's Yeah, I think it's a natural trend because when I was young, I also read a lot of novels, like detective novels and Stephen King sort of like novels. But as I grew older, I first switched to biographies, which is like also kind of entertaining, but not that much. And now I mostly read like just open ResearchGate and read whichever my friends there recommend. So it's less funny but more useful. Less fun but more useful. Yeah. So we talked about your book habits, but what are your hobbies and interests outside of the science? You said that sometimes you have to party hard. So what does it mean in your case? What does help you to disconnect, or or maybe something that surprisingly help you in scientific thinking? So please talk about that a bit, because maybe I will also use your advice, or some of our other listeners or viewers.
Well, I think after all these years, I enjoy two things a lot. First of all, is traveling. I'm currently outside Greece in Warsaw for a scientific visit, but I want to travel because I'm seeing different cultures and different people. One of the best things that I learned when I was spent some time in the US, because of this, the US adopts this multicultural and multi-nation approach, and I found people from all over the world, is that we become better people by looking at others and the way that think and believe in different things than what we believe. So traveling is one a major thing. Personally, I'm a fan of music, and I know you cannot tell by looking at me, but I usually go to rock and hard rock concerts all over Europe. So
Wow.
you'll see me, okay, not headbanging, but you'll see me in the front rows of major rock and hard rock groups all around Europe. That's why I spend my most of my spare money that traveling around and going to see groups singing both in Greece, but also I've been all over Europe in going to concerts.
Wow, that was unexpected, but it you really live by a principle, party hard. So it sounds like it.
Yeah, I listened to rock when I was young. I was immediately attracted to it, and then I haven't changed. So I'm still listening to this kind of music. So whenever there's a big Iron Maiden concert, I will go and I'll
Oh,
go to it.
wow.
So I will go to whatever is available. We don't get that much concerts in Greece, so I'll be traveling around and listening to more older, but also more modern approaches to rock or alternative rock or this kind of forms. So music really relaxes me, and this is something that I enjoy. Also, I do it with my daughter quite a lot and friends. So it's something that also binds me with my kids as a family.
Well, that's great, and I just want to add that I think that there is a certain that it's that music, like first of all, is connected with the seismic and with physics because these are also waves and something that we feel. And that there is you are not the first one who I interview, and there is one seismologist as well. I did not release this interview yet, but he actually studies um, the interaction of fans when they either clap or when they jump, for example, at Taylor Swift concerts, and they create real like seismic waves. So he also loves to go to concerts, like Lenny Kravitz one. He commented on it, and ACDC, something like that. So I see correlation actually between researchers, even like professors who like doing that. So maybe there is something common in
There's
rock
a strong
concerts.
connection with music and seismology because we know these are both waves. There are famous professors like Frank Serbaum who have dedicated a lot of their research into studying both seismology and music, and in fact doing joint work. In fact, creating music by converting seismograms into music. You know, that's also quite popular. I had a student of my own who then later finished his PhD at Berkeley University, where because deep events have a very, in Greece, they have a very specific pattern of with completely different attenuation. If you make this into music, you listen to very specific sounds. So yes, there's a strong connection between sounds and music and seismic waves, and you can explore it in many ways. I just enjoy the music, however, I must be honest.
Yeah, I mean. There is certainly like connection, and well, thanks for talking about it because I never thought about it, but now with every interview I learn so much about these kind of things which are not evident like from the first glance. So uh, but let's talk about your career. Looking back at your 30 plus years of fieldwork and research, which is like continuing, but so far, what was the single most memorable moment in your career? What is this? Was it the specific discovery, maybe frightening moment in the field, or perhaps a student succeeding? What was the most memorable moment in your career?
Um, I should not say that it's a moment of where we found something new. It was a moment where when my father presented me one figure, and perhaps I can show you this figure, if
Sure.
I may. I don't know if we manage, but let me explain what I mean. I don't know if you can see this figure. Um, Sorry.
I see.
Let me hide the. Okay, it's this figure here. So he didn't share this figure, but this is what the subduction looks like. And in our case, we have a subducting slab beneath the Aegean, and essentially there's a significant part of the slab which is there's a down deep extension. The slab becomes heavier and it's pulling itself towards larger depths. And when you look, this is how a schematic model looks like, and this is how a tomographic model looks like. So these green colors here, this is from a tomographic work we've done here, shows you how the slab subducts beneath the Aegean, and this is work I did when I was in Princeton with Houston Knowledge a long time ago. Now, all this work, not only the main effort was not simply to show how the slab is, and or identify this low mantle wedge. These red colors that you see here are hot material that essentially feeds the volcanoes on top. The biggest problem for me came The biggest challenge came when my father showed me this figure. This is a map that shows the distribution of damage from an earthquake which happened in 1964. My father was a young seismologist at that time, and he was on duty in the National Observatory of Athens. Athens is right in the center here, where this triangle is, and that's where he was located. And he receives a phone call from this area here, which is southwestern Peloponnesus. There's a village called Kinigos, which means hunter, and there was heavy damage, not heavy, significant damage in this village. And remember at that time there's no real-time network, so he collects the seismograms a couple of weeks later, because they are delivered by mail from seismological stations. What is natural nowadays that we learn about the epicenter at that time was not expected. You need to wait for days until the seism transferred. And he computes the epicenter, and the epicenter is at 160 kilometers beneath Athens. So this is in the beginning or perhaps before plate tectonics. We don't know anything about the subduction of the Aegean. And suddenly you have an earthquake which is beneath your feet at 160 kilometers, and the maximum damage occurs 200 kilometers away. This is not natural for a seismologist. When you have an earthquake here, you expect damage to be in the zone around the epicenter and decrease with distance. Suddenly, we have an earthquake which is here, and maximum damage is 200 kilometers away. And this is not something normal. Then, when I did my PhD in 30 years later, and together with work from other people, we found out that there's this red area here, which is just beneath the volcanic arc, where there's low velocity, high attenuation material. So essentially, we need to start thinking in 3D. What is happening is that this area here, beneath the volcanic arc, waves, when they travel, they have to go through this red area, which is like acts as an absorber, as a sound insulation layer. And therefore, waves, when they arrive above in Athens, they are strongly attenuated. When they travel along the subducting slab, they are just focusing, and then you can induce damage at a very large distance. So essentially, to make a long story short, when you have an earthquake here, like at 160 kilometers beneath Athens, waves have to travel up, and they go through this hot mantle wedge with low velocities and high attenuation, and the air waves are significantly attenuated. On the other hand, they go through the subducting slab. They are just channel waves, and they end up right in this village in southeast Peloponnesus. And they have high amplitudes, and they create a lot of damage. So with my students, Andreas Karlatoudis, who is now in LA working for ICOM, and with other students, we tried first to model these seismic waves and explain and be able to model the spectra. So these are recordings in the outer arc, and these are recordings in the back arc, and this difference is like one order of magnitude. So we're successful in modeling this, and we can recreate damage observed with our models, which are synthetic for historical events. This was another student, Harala Boskalas, with whom we work on historical damage. So when I saw this picture, I thought it would be my task to really try to explain why this happens in the Aegean. So gradually, so as I said, it's not a moment. The moment was when I observed the phenomenon. Then I decided to spend a lot of my time and have a lot of efforts with working with tomography, working with modeling of strong ground motion, working with stochastic simulation of intermediate depth earthquakes, to be able to really model and reproduce this phenomenon, and just allow to see this. And this, in a very funny way, is related to you, because right now you're in high fast, if I understand. So I'm showing you that these events not only are focused along the outer arc, but
In
they
Tel
have
Aviv.
significant impact with how the Mediterranean. So this event happened somewhere here. It's the 1956 7.7 earthquake. And as you can see, you see this banana-shaped isosceles, which means that this is the heavy damage area, which goes along the arc. So going in the back arc area, there's no damage. So right here, there's no damage. So energy is attenuated by the volcanic arc or the mantle wedge above the subducting slab, and nothing is felt in northern Greece. On the other hand, if you look this event, this is widely felt throughout the Mediterranean because the Mediterranean lithosphere has very quite low attenuation, so it's felt all the way down to southern Italy and Sicily and Malta. And amazingly, it had inflicted significant damage in the coast of Israel and Lebanon, as well as in the Nile Delta, especially in Cairo, where the damage was very significant. So you have an earthquake in the Hellenic Arc, and this focusing along the arc doesn't simply is not contained in Greece, but it reaches throughout the whole Eastern Mediterranean Sea. And if you don't believe this historical map built by a very famous seismologist, Zeeberg in 1932. You have to look at these events. It's happened just this May. These are two smaller events, but happened in the same more or less area in 2025, this last May. And I'm showing you the EMSC um, responses, the questionnaire responses that were filled in by people living in various countries. And you can see that this event here, which is in the Aegean, has numerous people recording how they are feeling it uh, in both in the Nile Delta as well as in the coast of Israel and Lebanon, and of course Cyprus and other areas. So this has happened also a few days later. That's another intermediate depth earthquake of magnitude 6.2. And look at the number of people here and here that have felt this earthquake. So even these moderate 6.2 events are very, very strongly felt throughout the whole Eastern Mediterranean. So this historical description of the extensive damage that the 7.7 event has inflicted are not simply an historical exaggeration, but these are actual things that we need to model. So, as I said, when my father showed me this first picture that I showed you, and this very peculiar pattern of an earthquake happens here, and the damage is 200 kilometers away, it really intrigued me, and I devote a significant part of my career in trying to understand and model why this happens.
Wow. So basically, you saw the riddle, and you wanted to unravel that, and you solved that, solved the mystery. So it's like a detective story.
Yeah, science is like that. You see the problems and you're trying to find to think. You need to build a conceptual model in your brain. I mean, and you understand does this happen? What do we need for something like so peculiar to happen? And if you start thinking about it and putting the knowledge into place and thinking about how should waves propagate and then run some models, then eventually you reach the right answer. It took some years, but it's that's what science is for.
Yeah, sure. So you talked about a very peculiar event, but if you could travel back in time, like millions, billions years or thousands of years, to witness one geological event in the Earth's history, which event would you choose and why?
Okay, I'm sure that geoscience will have various picks. Like they would like want to see the Chicxulub impact that the vanished the dinosaurs, or perhaps in our case, um, go back to the Minoan eruption of Santorini, which devastated the whole area and wiped out the local civilization. In my however, would be to go to 365 BC, where we had the largest earthquake in the Aegean in Western Crete, where the coastal uplift from that earthquake is roughly 9 meters. That's a megathrust 8.2 earthquake, or so forth, 8.3, 8.4, that really created a huge tsunami that impacted the whole Mediterranean area. These are very unique events which happen very rarely. We really don't know, or they have a return periods of the order of thousands of years. But naturally, as a seismologist, I would really like to somehow, from a safe place, of course, somewhere above,
Yeah, yeah.
observe when this okay happens and try to understand by looking at this the phenomena that it induced about its mechanism, because these events are rare, but they do happen. And although people have a very hard time to understand low probability events, we should make sure that they understand that such events are definitely feasible. Like the previous 7.7 event that I showed you is something which has happened, therefore it can happen again. And I'm sure that people in your country or in Egypt would really like to know that if there's such a danger and try to see if they can do something about it. So this 365 event is a very critical event in the Greek seismological history. So I would pick that event to be able to go and witness it and see what exactly happened. Was it a single event? Was there multiple events? What's the aftershock sequence? There's this concept that this event induced resulted in significant induced seismicity all over Mediterranean in the following decades and hundreds of years. So that's a major event in Greek seismology, which I would like to somehow witness.
Yeah, that's definitely worth witnessing that. And uh, let's approaching the end of our interview. Let's come back to the detective stories, which basically science is, and talk about one of such mysteries. So, despite all our sensors and satellites, what is the one thing about the tectonics of the Mediterranean that we still don't understand? And what is the black box you wish you could open?
Well, there are a lot of things we don't understand, a lot of challenges in science, especially in the Eastern Mediterranean. I would say that the tectonics are quite well understood in to some extent, at least the regional tectonics, not at a very local scale. The biggest problem, however, has to do with the fact that although we have a general understanding about the type of faults that exist, the distributed pattern of deformation, the impact of the distributed pattern of deformation we have is we have a lot of faults, and most of them we really don't know anything about them. We don't cannot see them. They are hidden beneath the surface. So it's kind of annoying that although we know that if an earthquake happens in an area will be perhaps, for example, a normal faulting event, we have no idea about where this fault is, how it operates, what are the event times. We have a very hard time to understand the seismic cycle of a fault and of a group of faults. There, although there have been a lot of proposals and a lot of ideas, experimental data are simply not enough. Imagine a fault that has a major earthquake every 1,000 years. Humanity and scientific observations in the current form only span, let's say, a century. So what's a century with against 1,000 years? I mean, it's just a small fraction. So we're trying with a small fraction of data and a small fraction of more advanced data like the satellite information, we're talking GNSS information and all this kind of stuff. We're trying to understand something that extends over much larger time periods. And this is a difficult task. It's still puzzling. We still don't understand all the things. We still don't know where a lot of the faults are, especially in submarine areas where satellites cannot access it. You cannot easily put seismographs there. So it's the whole story of seismic cycle repeatability, why a part of the fault breaks, another doesn't, is still a mystery to science.
Yeah, so maybe you will be the one who uncover these mysteries, or at least some part of them. That would be nice. And finally, looking at the next generation of researchers, in just one single word, how would you describe the future of the geosciences?
Um, I think there are two obvious revolutions, in fact, in geoscience that will change its face for the next, at least in my area, in my topic, which is geophysics, in the next decades. The first is machine learning and deep learning and artificial intelligence. Already we're using a lot of such tools, but I think this will revolutionize the way we approach all topics of geoscience, inversions, modeling. This will, because it allows you to see things that our simple minds cannot see. We know how to plot quantity A against quantity B, perhaps against two other quantities. Well, when it comes to multi-parametric analysis and multi-component analysis, our two-dimensional or three-dimensional brains are limited. And that's where these methods strive and will succeed. And we'll see a lot of things that were previously undetected within the data that we already are collecting. And the second evolution is fiber optic seismology. So the possibility to use fiber optic lines to measure strains and seismic signals will give us unprecedented coverage of extended areas at very high quality. So we'll have optical lines which essentially will correspond to a virtual sensor every, let's say, 50 or 100 meters. And this will allow us to have access to submarine areas where these cables exist, land areas where optical networks are becoming more and more dense, and really achieve an unprecedented density of information with much lower cost. Okay, it's expensive to set up a line, but if you set up a line for other purposes, like for communication, and you have the line there, you can really work on the line without disturbing its primary use for telecommunication, and then make this really a fabulous antenna for seismology. So I think the combination of fiber optic seismology and artificial intelligence will change the face of seismology and geophysics. And I think by the time that I retire, which is like in 10 years from now, geophysics and seismology will be a quite different discipline.
Wow, that's
So if I was
yeah,
a so if I was a young student, those are two of the topics that I would really want to focus because I think they would change the face of seismology.
yeah, I totally agree with you. That what definitely something that we read a lot about, and it's gonna only grow faster and bigger. So, Kostas, thank you so much. Your work is vital for understanding the complex region we live in, and I really appreciate your time and your huge contribution to the geosciences.
Thank you very much for giving me this very nice opportunity, Alexei.